Greetings. This is the Emergence Speaker Series focusing on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on February 20th, 2026. And of course, it's about this whole time period that we are moving through. I'm your host, Marina Ormes, and I'm chatting with some wonderful guests to help you navigate the changing times and work with these important transits to help us be able to shape the future in the best possible ways. You can learn more about this series at transformationalastrology.com. Sign up there for a free account, and that will get you early access to each speaker's video. That's transformationalastrology.com, and you'll get the notifications, and you can go there to see all the videos together. I'm so excited to welcome our next speaker in this series, Tracy Chipman. Tracy is she, they, are Tracy's pronouns, is a mentor, connector, language, and healing artist. She, they explores spoken and written language through solo and collective engagement and body-based practices that invite folks into sensorial aliveness and deeper connections with life. She lives at the edge of an inland sea in northern Wisconsin with her partner and two sassy kitties. Their work engages with the energies of liminality, cyclicity, and ephemerality. In March 2023, Tracy published her first book, Borealis Mundi, Resting in Place, Loss, and Grace. I'm so excited to have Tracy here. You can learn more at tracychipman.net. Tracy and I go way back. I don't even know where we first met, Tracy, but Tracy's work has been impacting me for many years. And we've had this sort of, what's the word, like synergy between your work as you talk and share stories and folklore and the power of images and language. And that fits in perfectly with my understanding of the energies of the planets and the archetypes. So I always enjoy getting to chat with Tracy. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you, Marina. It's such a joy to be here with you today and engage together in this really, really potent threshold of planetary possibilities.
Totally. Yeah. So you're not an astrologer, but your work very much works with the energies of what it is we are collectively experiencing and moving through. And the title for your talk today is Living a Story of Courage and New Beginnings. So do you want to just kind of break that down for us and tell us, what are some of the deeper truths within those words?
Yeah, so there's that title, it sounds like, wow, yeah, okay, but let's break it down even further. Let's distill that into yet even more discernible energies. And when I think about, living, that first word, living a story, living as in aliveness, living as in being alive, and that aliveness is a powerful ingredient, like intentionally, like on purposely finding, experiencing, staying connected to our aliveness. And it's easy to kind of go on into autopilot and almost forget our aliveness, which is just so bizarre because we're so alive, right? And we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't alive in the way that we're talking about alive. So living as in aliveness, being alive. And story as in, gosh, humans are hardwired. We're so connected. It's the most ancient aspect of being human, this connection to story to explain mysteries, story to claim identity, story as meaning making, because humans are meaning making beings. And stories to the degree that stories are so woven into the fabric of being human. There are stories that are allies, there are stories that are helpers, and we all know that there are certain stories that are harming and that can be even unknowing obstacles in our own expression of aliveness and being in the world and being the beings that we want to move into, if that makes sense. So claiming story as this liberatory process, this allyship, and also the risk taking involved in claiming new stories. Courage as in action, generating from our hearts. The root of courage is the French word coeur, which is the heart. So courage is something that initiates in the heart. And as a practice, right? As a noticing, what does that even mean? How are we even like motivated to take action through the heart? And how is that different from other places where action might generate, i.e. the head, which is, often where we find ourselves, again, for better and or worse. And then, I think if there's any words highlighted in this title that we would highlight with a nice broad bright yellow, it would be the new beginning. This particular conjunction, again, I'm not an astrologer, I feel these things, I don't often have language for these things, and that's why I so value the work that Marina is doing in the world, where I can connect in with her transmission, her translation through her lens and her perception. And this energy of new beginnings is a really powerful place here right now. And I want to just open up this energy of new beginnings, which sounds great. And I want to go further and claim it, at least through my lens and my experience, as the new beginnings that might be connected to reincarnation. So reincarnating, not just a new beginning like, oh, I'm going to have a different flavor of ice cream at the ice cream shop today, or I'm going to start brushing my teeth 3 times a day. I don't know. There's all places we re-begin. I'm just throwing out things. I'm talking about reincarnation. I'm talking about that level in a symbolic way, right? In a symbolic way, symbolically. And that energy of reincarnation then is also such a beautiful reminder that new beginnings often, not always, are connected to something ending, to something dissolving, to something composting, to something dying. And I think that's a part of the process in my work, paying attention to the language of cyclicity, because we are cyclical beings. Women even more so, our bodies cycle in amazing ways. Being able to connect with that dissolution cycle, that death cycle. And and even to move through a lot of the layers that modernity has put over it to keep us from it, to like hide it, to shame us, to call it taboo. And yet it's the only thing that we know for certain, really, right? That we will come to an ending, and literally ending of this physical body, but that when we can embrace the little endings along the way, the small deaths along the way, so we can really emerge into this reincarnated form as a metaphor. So
you said so much just there. I just want to no, you're good. I just want to unpack a little bit.
yeah,
it's beautiful. So let's just sit with some of these ideas, and maybe just feel them in our bodies. So we have this idea, first of all, of being alive. What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to live a story? And what story are we living? And are we choosing that story? And how can we choose that story? Of courage, right? A story of courage and the heart. And what does that look like? What does it mean to be in action and new beginnings? as we live our story and live the story of our choice, right? And so that makes me think of, you can have the exact same event or circumstance that you live through, but the story you tell about it can be different. Yeah, I mean, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because I feel like yeah, and the reincarnation of that.
I do, and I think that it's really, really important. And this is why, to even before we talk about that, and I might actually ask you to speak that again.
Mm-hmm.
But before we even, choose the story and like break a pattern of an old story to claim a different story, I just want to talk about knowing ourselves and having a connection to something that's authentic within us, and being conscious. And this is a huge practice, right? This isn't achieved by drinking some yummy elixir. This isn't achieved by taking any kind of supplement immediately, right? This is a deep practice. This can feel like work. And I think that's really important, because there are so many stories that we get sort of like glommed onto us in modernity, and depending on where you live, and the culture and the familial stories that you grew up in. So that's a thread of knowing, having this connection with this inner part, the heart, the gut, the intuition. And I think that I also want to hold lightly the energies of claiming a new story or a different story isn't, I'm just going to call it what it sometimes occurs as I see it playing out, even in my own life, like a bypassing of what is, a bypassing of emotions that really might feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So we can make lemonade out of lemons. And when it's done authentically, when you've been with the emotional body, you've been with the psychological body, you've tended to the physical body, and you're feeling what you're ready to feel, those new stories actually find us, rather than us thinking them into place. And I don't want to even say that it's often a mix of both, but these stories, that lemonade, that making something from, a hard thing, it is almost like a grace. And
yeah,
and you can fake it, and maybe you'll make it. There's something to that, to pull out some cliches. And sometimes if we're just going to fake it, we might not make it, because that bypass, there's something in us, which inevitably will show itself at some point, right? It'll find its way for us. It'll get our attention again. The good news and the bad news, right? So it feels important, if we're going to unpack this, choosing a story, having choice and claiming a story. It's, again, coming back to the language of story. Stories are animate beings. They have an agency that is, it can find us rather than us finding them, if that makes sense. And when we create space to feel and create space for something to emerge that we might not even know what that is, there's a deep ring of truth and authenticity that's possible. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. And I am, in my mind, I'm connecting what you're saying to the planets. And it's so powerful, because it's it is a mental practice to think about, well, how do the planets speak to this? But I'm also feeling it really in my body as you speak, and that way that when we are in the truth of our emotions, that and what you're saying, the story finds us, is like, it's not anything we control. It's not anything we make happen in that sense, but it's about being in the truth. And Pluto in Aquarius is the planet of power and empowerment and vulnerability, which is the other thing that comes to the surface very much as you're saying this, is like being in those feelings in that raw power is very vulnerable. And with the Saturn and Neptune conjunction in Aries, we're also moving into this energy of newness, but also kind of the energy of the Fool, right? Like we just stumble into the new story, but also so many other processes. I mean, it is a practice, but it also is, like you're saying, something that when we're just allowing ourselves to be in that truth, that process can unfold from there.
Yeah. And often, because humans are so connected to story, they're everywhere, from the little tittle tattle that might happen as gossip between neighbors to obviously books, movies, the news. There's stories everywhere, and the stories of our family. And then there's this massive, like, trove of stories, traditional stories, mythologies that hold these archetypal energies. There's the story threads that we might glean from reading good poetry that charms us. So as humans, we've been gathering stories, whether we know it or not. But we can probably think back. In fact, this is an exercise when I work with folks one-to-one, like think back in your life and create a half a page for every 10 years of your life. So birth through 10, or even, obviously birth, you're not going to remember much, but early childhood through 10 years old, stories that impacted you, whether you saw them on television, whether there were stories that were told in your family, stories that sparkled and charmed you. They're in you then. You become a carrier of them. Also, stories that scared you, you also become a carrier of them. And when we know what those stories are or more conscious or more deliberate, then they become allies that can kind of poke through as allies when we need a story to hold us, when a story that's flavored through our own life can show up as the making lemonade. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So be intentional about the stories that you seek, and honor them, for just like we honor the planetary bodies, honoring the story bodies that we're full of, whether we acknowledge it or even are aware of it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. There, and it's that process, like you were saying, of reincarnation, where
Yes.
it's almost like we can call on older stories. Maybe we become aware of a story we have going on right now, and maybe there's a story from the past, or a story from our ancestors, or a story that gives us a new sort of, that new aliveness, that new sense of living.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes. Yes.
And you mentioned death. So, and it's an awkward word to even say, right? It's that, it's the ending that has to come before the beginning. And we have the energy of Saturn as, the Reaper. There's lots of different names Saturn has, but it is about that inevitability of mortality, and the idea that because there are limits, it shapes our creative process. So we get choices within, within the life that we have this much time, and we have this much, whatever, and it's what we do with that.
Yes. Yes. Mm.
And Saturn is just coming out of Pisces, the sign of release, the sign of letting go, the sign of grief, the sign of loss. And that is the necessary, not even necessary, like it has its own beauty, right? But it's the precursor to the new beginning. And so, in a sense, it's almost like, oh, I kind of want to be in that loss. Like, I'm not ready for the new beginning yet. but of course, we can also get excited about what's yet to come. And so there is kind of that sort of irony of being on that cusp.
Yeah, and the power of holding both, really, which is a paradigm shift from kind of that all or nothing, or this or that, when it is and holding, instead of this dichotomy, holding both can coexist. Opposites coexist. And that's this whole rich liminal reality that isn't often brought to the forefront in the kind of various paradigms of power that we grew up in and are living in, and we could even say are in the process of dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So how would you like connect that to, sort of some of the things that are going on in the world right now, and old stories and new stories, and how we can think about ourselves in this moment in the collective? How can we think about ourselves in the context of what is changing in the world?
So how can we think of ourselves? Yes. And, I have a story.
Yes.
And before the story, and because my, this role that I've been investing and so deeply enmeshed with for 30 years now as an oral storyteller, oral stories are also like the foundation of the human experience, right? We haven't been reading them for really all that long in the scope of the human existence. And their currency is images and imagery. So the image that rises up as you share and you ask that question, you pose that, isn't even an answer, but perhaps a breadcrumb into that question. And it's the image of a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis.
Yeah.
And just what that, like the depth of that, literally, biologically, and of course metaphorically and symbolically. The caterpillar, from the research that I have looked into, and the people that know way more about this than I do, like the caterpillar really does not know that it's going to become a butterfly. Like it doesn't have a thought like, gee, this will be different when I'm a butterfly. And it's like that some of us might be still in that late stage caterpillar phase. Some of us might be already zipped up, becoming this gooey green oatmeal shit in the chrysalis, dissolving. Which, right, like we think of it as this beautiful process, and it is, but it's a death.
I love what you're bringing, in through this imagery, because what is the consciousness of the caterpillar? We don't know, but it's in the moment, right? And
Right.
so it has this experience of dissolving. I mean, maybe we can relate this to our own experience, but of not knowing, of like, wow, this feels different, and we don't know what's coming, but that doesn't mean we're not creating it.
Correct. Correct. Because inevitably, with all the factors that, need to be in play, this new shape will form inside the chrysalis. And we know that that butterfly will then break through and come out in this new state, in this reincarnated state. And before we even get too excited about that butterfly, then like flying away into its next best life, there's this quality that I've recently heard about, again, through people who know more about these things, that there's a particular cell that lives inside the caterpillar, and it also lives inside the butterfly. And these cells are called imaginal cells. That's what they're called. And they're the only part of the caterpillar that it might not even know what it's supposed to do until it becomes goo. And then it becomes the remembering and the big alchemizer for this butterfly to exist. And it's the only shred of what was in the caterpillar that will also continue on in the butterfly. And if anyone who's listening to this knows anything different biologically, please drop it in the chat, drop it in the comments, because, again, this is just a source who knows more about these things than I do. But I love that idea that they're called imaginal cells. Like, how freaking awesome is that? And that it's these cells that actually, like, they might not know what's going to happen next, but they know they have a job to do. And they're these like shape-shifting qualities that create this big shift and change in the life cycle of that caterpillar butterfly.
That is so mind-blowing. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, imaginal cells. So we can imagine that we have this imaginal cell within us, that what we know is dissolving, and that feels weird. We don't know what it means, and we feel that sense of loss, and we don't know what's coming. And I'm not saying, like everything's perfect, or there's some like, fantasy of a future, which there may or may not be. But the point is that something new is coming, right, and we will then have the opportunity to navigate that.
Yeah.
But before that comes, we get to imagine it, and we get to try it out, and we get to, like you said, remember. So remember the deeper truth of who we are, bring that into form, in new ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just weaving in this word of imagination and how important it is right now. Imagination is kind of like the word death in many ways, because it's really not part of most humans' languaging or even practicing. It's often, and this is in my experience working with imagination through storytelling, something that is often associated with children, because theirs are so lively.
Yeah.
But that adults, like, it's really kind of something that isn't valued or even sometimes connected to that, unless you're, of course, hanging out with the best creatives in the world. And then, of course, imagination is alive and well. But you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So how can we, like a practice, grow our imaginations, imagine silly things like purple cows, and just allow ourselves to play in that realm of what the mind can do. I really do believe imagination is a whole body experience, but it's generated, and in the mind is for sure a useful vehicle for it. Yeah, and it's such a way to break through some of those crusty stories that are either unconscious or holding us back, and we might not even realize it, right? And Yeah.
I love that you said play too. Like
Yeah.
we get to play with this.
Yes.
It's not about like right and wrong. And
Totally.
and when kids are playing and using their imagination, they're not sitting there going, "Oh my God, I did it the wrong way," right?
No, hopefully not, right? Like I
Hopefully,
hope
right,
not.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah.
So yeah, so we can embrace that spirit of wonder and playfulness
Yeah.
and curiosity
Yeah.
as we learn how to live a story of courage and new beginnings.
Yes. And so, on that note, would you like to hear a story?
I would love to hear a story. What are you going to tell us?
Well, this is a story that came my way many years ago from um, a storytelling magician from the southwest of England. And his name is Martin Shaw. And this story harkens back to a time on an island, the one that sits next to the island of England, which is known as Éire, also known as Ireland. And it's a story that goes back and further back and further back to a time when there were sovereign leaders, given the name of kings and queens. And sovereign in that not necessarily this hierarchical energy, but sovereign as in sovereign in themselves, and most importantly, sovereign in relationship with the land and, you know, with the people of the land that they were holding in their awareness. So the king is dead. The king is dead. And there is no heir. There is no son or daughter, brother, sister, niece, nephew. There's no heir. And this was a big deal. This was problematic. How can there not be a sovereign? How can there not be this energetic holder, this one who holds in their awareness all the aspects of the land and the people and the beings on that land? Okay. So there was chaos because there was no leader. Leader in the highest sense, yeah. Not hierarchical sense, not in power sense. Leader. So, you know, there was chaos, there was confusion, fear grew, and one wise one talked to another wise one, and soon they were sitting in a council of elders where the oldest of the oldest in that circle remembered a story that they had heard when a sovereign had died and there hadn't been an heir. And there's this ancient practice that was called into play, which maybe comes through once every 200 or 300 or 400 years. And so the old one remembered, the story was shared, it populated the imaginations of those sitting in council, and from there spread through the web of language throughout the land. And so an event was held, reflecting back on the story that had been told. There would be an event. There would be a calling in of the next sovereign who was out there inevitably waiting to step into this role. And the event looked something like this. There would be a chariot. There would be two horses pulling the chariot. One would be black and one would be white. They would take the chariot and the horses to a stretch of road along a coastal path. They would find the path that would fork. This was right at the edge of the sea, likely on the precipice of a cliff. And the practice and the event was that the next sovereign, the next one who could hold all the things and lead through courage, would be able to ride those horses as fast as they could possibly go along that track, along the cliff's edge, to the point where the road forked. They would hold the tension and also hold the non-doing. They would not guide the horse to the right or to the left, which were the only two paths available. And in that tension, in that non-doing, in that stepping in to the agency that was already inevitably theirs, a third road would appear between the two forks. And when that third road appeared, then the sovereign would ride the horses on that new third road, not right and not left. Sounds quite mad, really, doesn't it? But imagine a time when our imaginations were so much more lively, when things that we might call inexplicable or even magical exist, and who's to say they don't if we can see them and be in them out in the wild world. So this event was called into place. People gathered, they came from far and near, and anyone who wanted to could have a go. And so the day was spent with people feeling called to give, to try, to putting on their gloves, to taking the reins and riding those horses down that straight shot of path, and then not veering right and not veering left. But no third road opened up. And in some of the tellings, lives were lost. So it was nearing the end of the day, and no sovereign had been found. And folks were feeling disappointed, wondering what would happen next. Now, all along that day, there was a young woman who had watched and waited, curious and expectant, wondering who the next sovereign would be. And each time they would open up the call for another participant, she had felt a little nudge inside of her to step up, rise, go forth. But she didn't. And here, in the last light of the day, at a time that is known as the gloaming, twilight, where it is not day or not night, but a bit of both. The urge, the nudging was quite loud, and they would call the last person to give their shot, to come up and try. Come, come, who feels called? And she answered, and she raised her hand, and she stepped forward, and her heart was trembling and beating. And folk in the crowd saw a girl, really, though she was a young woman, with dirt on her hands, working hands, dirt on her face, rips in her clothes. But she stepped into the chariot and she grabbed the soft leather of the reins. And she knew horses. And she urged the horses forward, and the chariot started to move and roll. And soon she was flying down that single path. She could see the fork in the road coming in right ahead of her. Not go right, not go left. Hold the tension, stay in her body, stay with her breath, stay with her heart. And there in that dusky light, in that in-between where the veil thins, a third road opened up. Just in the nick of time. And folks couldn't believe what they had seen. They were rubbing their eyes and craning their necks, but they had seen it. And they were watching the chariot move down this third road. Not this and not that. Well, the crowd that was left to watch there at the end of the day as the sun slipped into the sea greeted the young woman, seeing her in new light. She stepped down from the chariot and was welcomed and was crowned, was made sovereign of the land. And the people bent their heads in honor and reverence to her leadership. Mm-hmm. And that's the story as it was told to me.
Wow.
The beginning.
The beginning. Wow. So,
So yeah. Stay in the story. I know we've got a few more minutes, so just for two more seconds, just stay soaking in the imagery of the story, not even the meaning making. There's all kinds of time for meaning making. Just stay with those images, however they occur. Likely we share some, but everyone's imagination is unique and different and wild. Notice the parts of the story, the images that charm you. Notice the ones that kind of troubled you for whatever reason. And yeah, there's a story.
Here's a story.
For these times, as an ally, if you feel called, you can sit in that chariot, you can take up the gloves. You can imagine that third road. And collectively, if we all did this, that's a reincarnation right there.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Such powerful imagery of another possibility.
Of living a story of courage and new beginnings.
Thank you, Tracy. Yay. Oh, well, I have nothing to follow that. I think we will let you all just sort of soak that in. Let it move you in your imaginal selves, and we'll see where we all go. Again, transformationalastrology.com is where you can find more interviews like this, helping you work with these powerful energies. And there's more about Tracy there and her website. You can learn about her book. You can, we'll put the link to her Substack where you can listen to more stories, which obviously is a gift that Tracy is sharing with us. So thank you. TracyChipman.net, transformationalastrology.com. Thank you, Tracy. Infinite gratitude. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Marina. Such a blessing, such a joy. I feel so alive. Thank you.
Yes, very powerful aliveness.
Yeah.
All right. Bye for now. We'll see you next time.